How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for willing to do this.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I could just jump around a bit before getting to Fire Emblem.
Okay.
So professionally, was the first thing you did a 7-Eleven commercial for voiceover?
Yes, that was the first thing that I did voiceover wise. On camera, I also did an in-store video for J.C. Penney where I had to wrap a present um, around Christmas, and it was like showing kids prepping presents for their parents for the holidays. And I did a terrible job, and I got $100, and I felt like I had gotten $1 million because I couldn't believe at 5 years old that I had $100 for wrapping a present. It was so cool.
Was one of those also how you got into SAG too?
Actually, I grew up in Texas working, and Texas is a right to work state. So, the goal is to be union eligible, but then I had been always told by agents not to join until I moved to Los Angeles. So I think the job that I booked where I joined SAG was actually New Girl, but the project that got me eligible to join SAG was Walker Texas Ranger. I did the first episode of Walker Texas Ranger when I was 8.
Okay. And I know in terms of anime that started with Peach Girl.
Yes, yes. Peach Girl was the first anime that I did.
Did you take the dubbing easier or was it harder to get used to?
I loved it. I still am so incredibly grateful to Zach Bolton at Funimation, who was directing Peach Girl. And I just went in on a regular old audition. My agent sent me in and said they're looking for new actors. I had been trying to work at Funimation for years, not knowing. I thought Funimation only did Dragon Ball Z. And I was like, that would be so cool to get to work on cartoons. So my agent finally got me an audition. I went in, had never dubbed before. For your initial audition, at least at the time at Funimation, they didn't have you do any dubbing. They just had you read these audition lines without any sort of knack for matching because they knew they could teach you. And I remember my first session, he taught me how to listen for the beeps and how to match flaps. And over the course of that show, I kind of got to cut my teeth and learn. And I loved the process of getting to the technicality of matching the rhythm, matching the flaps, and having to do quick rewrites on the fly. It felt a lot like a theater rehearsal. If anybody's ever done one act play, it's where you're like trying to cut lines for time and edit here, edit there, or on a film set where they're saying this joke doesn't work, let's throw this in. So it was a little bit of that on the fly adjustment, and also the technicality of having to match the flaps and make sure that everything fit, and then getting to see the final product and go, yes, we did it, that worked, and now moved on to the next. So that was a very fun process. It is still one of my favorite things to do. I love doing live action dubbing for whatever Netflix or Apple TV show that they have. And I also love getting to do dubbing for anime and video games. It's so much fun.
Do you think that you have a personal preference too on working on more dramatic projects over comedic or no?
No, actually, I love getting to do comedic stuff. I mean, I love doing drama. When I was younger, I was like, all I want to do is something like serious and dramatic because I had only gotten hired for upbeat, light kind of fun things. And now that I've gotten older, like I feel like all I get hired for is like very dark, brooding, emotional, which I love getting to do. But the few times I get to come in and do something off the wall and comedic, and I get to play a crazy um, character, I always learn so much about myself. And people have usually said, this is where your wheelhouse is. You really should do more comedy. So maybe I'll do more comedy in the future, but I love getting to sink my teeth into some real drama.
I'm sure there's been more than a couple too, but what do you think the darkest headspace you've had to go for anime is, or like anime games?
Ooh, darkest headspace for anime. Um, Gosh, I don't know. I know for video games, one of the hardest days that I had was for Cyberpunk 2077. There was a scene and there were a couple of days where I remember leaving the booth and it just stuck with me the rest of the day. And I knew I was going to have to come back at 9 a.m. the next morning and do it all over again. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because it was so hard and it was so heavy and it was a side quest. And I was so thankful that the director had worked with me for a while and was a very compassionate, understanding director. And he said, "We're going to end on something lighter and we'll come back and finish this tomorrow," because he didn't want me leaving the booth with something so heavy and so dark. And so that was really, really hard. There definitely have been days in um, anime that have stayed with me. I know there's been moments in Fairy Tail where it's been really, really hard. Actually, Sword Art Online, there have been many days where I left the booth and just emotionally, where I was, maybe not the darkest that I've been, but emotionally, it got very vulnerable. I was working on the Mother's Rosario arc, and Austin is dealing with loss and grief in that arc. And I had lost my great aunt right before we had come to work on that arc. And I had never lost someone that was that close to me, that I had such a close relationship with. And usually the emotional stuff, it's very easy for me to go to that place and be very vulnerable. And for whatever reason, I had thought I had been processing her death well and healthily. But when it came time to go through some of those scenes, the director noticed that I was holding back, and he's like, just do this scene and talk to her. And I broke down, and I then thankfully was able to work through my grief through the character. But it definitely stayed with me after I left. Kotaro Lives Alone was another one. I was directing the show, and I also was voicing Kotaro. So Kotaro Lives Alone was my life for like a month and a half, 2 months. And it was very, very hard. Some of the things that the character's going through, and kind of feeling like a parent as the director, wanting to tell his story and protect him, and then also playing him. Um, it was very traumatic. And then Rhea was another one, Rhea in Fire Emblem. That was definitely a character that there were a couple sessions where I just um, felt so emotionally raw after what I had learned in her backstory or what we had gone through that day. And a couple of days later, you feel like really light because you've gotten to get some of like that icky stuff out that you have not processed, that you've been living with. But in the moment, yeah, it's heavy.
Well, I would think that I know these were a while ago now, but your characters in things like Shiki would be pretty.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Shiki is a great show, and I loved getting to work on it, but especially in the back half of the season, I feel like when everything flipped, um, stuff got very, very hard, especially what Sunako goes through, and her. Um, I mean, I felt that she was such a light, and just so optimistic, and some of the things that she is put through was really hard to see.
Talking on major characters too, do you think that you relate the most to Minako, or is it somebody else?
I relate to everybody, and it's hard for me to pick one character that I'm like, oh, above all, this one is the one that's closest to me. Yeah, and I can't pick a favorite. I've been saying recently that my favorite is probably the character that I know all of my other characters would rally behind and say, yes, we will protect that character, fight to the death to protect that character, and it would be Kotaro, because I know that they would defend little Kotaro to the end. But as far as which one is the most like me, it's hard to say. And I feel like different people see different aspects of me. My family would probably say she's more like this character. My friends would probably say, no, she's more like this character. Different people that know me from different times in my life would see different things. So it's hard to pick just one and say like, no, this is me, because I feel like they all have definite big pieces of me and pieces of my heart within them. So it's hard to say, no, this one is the most like me.
Is that the same case with all your characters in Fire Emblem too, or is it more based to one?
Oh yeah. I mean, May is super fun and bubbly and light, and is the comedy one, and kind of sassy. And Sita is the romantic, very sweet, very. I feel like in some ways Sita is the one that I want. I would love to feel like I had my life all together, like I imagine Sita does. And Gwendolyn's, fierce and strong and can handle all of that stuff. I don't feel like that I am like that. But then when push comes to shove and I have to take care of things, absolutely, I can do that. And then Rhea is sort of the part of me that is loves big and also feels big. She's also, as we know, very connected to her mom. I'm very connected to my mom, and now that I have a daughter, that kind of part of her feels even more real and even deeper. So, but yeah, I don't have that other form like Rhea does. Although I did have a nickname in acting class when I was a kid, and they would call me Scare Me and say like when I had to do really dramatic, scary scenes, that like scary side came out. So maybe I do have that other evolved form. I don't know.
And speaking of getting involved with the franchise for the first time, was that a pretty general audition too?
Yeah, actually, I think the very first time that I got brought in to audition for Fire Emblem, I want to say it was for um, Heroes, and I want to say it was for Sita. And then after that, they were recording the game Echoes, and I think I got May as a result of that. Um, Gwendolyn kind of fell somewhere in between those two, or a little bit after Echoes, and certainly Rhea with Three Houses was much later. But I don't remember the timeline. It was one of the first times working for that studio, and so I was just so excited to get to come in. And people had said when I moved out to LA, "Have you gotten to work on Fire Emblem yet?" And I said, "No, I would love to, but I haven't gotten the opportunity." And so those came very, very close together, and I can't remember which exactly came first. I think it was Sita first for Heroes, though.
Were you already a fan of the franchise prior?
Yes, I had not, and I still haven't played all of the Fire Emblem games, but I certainly was aware of the franchise and I was a fan of their storytelling and their character creation. I think they do such a great job about, with so many characters, making them all so distinct. And that's why I think the franchise is so beloved, is everybody has such a unique persona, for lack of a better word, not to mix franchises there at all. But I think they're really, really great. They're all lovable. The colors are fantastic. I love when they do different skins, especially in Heroes. It is so fun to get to see what they come up with, and they are such a collaborative and supportive team. I know, I remember when I went in for my first session for Three Houses, they spent so much of my first session just telling me the backstory and the lore of Rhea. And they said, "You're going to need to know this because she knows this." And so much of her character is her past and her connection and her deep love and her deep feelings. So we have to tell you everything start to finish. Nobody else is going to get the full piece of the lore, and to be so generous with that information in the session, rather than being like, "Oh, we could get as many lines done as possible." They really wanted to make sure that I was armed with as much information for the story. And it doesn't happen every day that you get a team that's willing to do that, and they always are willing to do that, which is lovely to work with.
Were the other characters like Gwendolyn and Cecilia, were those just given to you at a certain point then?
Gwendolyn definitely was. Sita, I did audition for Sita. I think we were doing a session and they said there's this other character, Gwendolyn, that we think you'd be really good for. So we're just gonna do a quick audition to make sure that we can get the voice that we want, and make sure it's a good fit. So it's sort of like I guess a paid audition while I was doing something else, like a bonus trial character, which happens a lot when they want to pack as much into a session. Oftentimes they'll throw another character at you and say, "Let's just try this one on for size, see if it's a good fit. If not, we might have another character for you. And if we don't, then we'll just stick with the one that we hired you to do." So I was thrilled to get to kind of experiment, and that they thought of me for another character, because it's always fun to get to play as many different characters and types as possible in a session.
I know you've gotten to play Cecilia a few times too, if you have much affinity with her.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very, very fun to get to do that. I, man, as far as like an affinity, I love all of them. I am always thrilled when people say, "I know with that when they said, we think you'd be a really good fit for this one. This character reminds us of you." And then when they describe the character, it's always like such a compliment where you're like, "You see all of these wonderful things in me? That's so nice. I don't see that, but thank you." So yeah, that was very fun to get to do.
And for those who aren't aware too, how do you differentiate the vocal placements all of your characters in them?
So we have a reference track, which is really lovely that we can, they play the characters for us so that once we start each session, they say, we're going to do this character first, then this character, this character. And especially if we're doing 3 or 4 in one session, it is absolutely instrumental to keep having that reference track to go back to say this is what this character sounds like, this is the range, this is how far we can go, just so nobody overlaps. But they have a couple lines for me each time that they'll play for each character, which is very helpful.
Do you have a single default line to get into Rhea or Sita's headspaces?
I don't have a single line that I can remember. Sometimes they pick different ones throughout different. I know for Rhea we have what we call Rhea, and then we have Dark Rhea. So I have different lines for Dark Rhea that I have for Rhea. Can't remember any of the ones off the top of my head. Um, Usually for Sita, there's one line that references Marth, because that you just have to. And I know May's line probably has making fun of Bowie in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But I can't remember the words off the top of my head. When I go into the sessions, usually I'll record Fire Emblem, with an exception being if we're working on a game like for Three Houses. When we were working on Three Houses, I recorded Rhea quite often. But usually for Heroes, we go in maybe once or twice a year for like a quick session to do a change of skin or whatever the case might be, if it's a different holiday or things like that. And we always get different lines. And I have gotten into a habit, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, because we have to sign an NDA for everything. And usually with Nintendo, they're very, very strict with NDA, and the pages are watermarked with your name and Nintendo on it. So you're like, oh, this is terrifying. If I make any mistakes, my name literally is all over this. So usually my default is whenever I go into the booth, I give myself like a little bit of minor amnesia when I leave, like don't remember anything too specific. Don't remember anything that could incriminate you later. To the fullest extent that when I worked on Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I had to delete emails that had the studio that I recorded in. And I didn't have the character's name, but I had to delete any of those emails and the auditions and all that stuff. And I had, I guess, forced myself to forget one of the scenes, one of the character's final scenes. I play Queen Sonia, and when the game came out and I was watching the playthrough, I was like, this is not me. I did not do this. And then as I remembered, as I was watching the scene, I was like, I did do this. I have literally made myself forget this scene so that I could not spoil anyone. This is a whole new level. So when people say like, do you know when something's coming out, or do you remember anything specific from a session? Sometimes I do, but oftentimes I have, I guess done like a Men in Black move and made myself forget so that I don't incriminate myself later.
Well, have you found that with fan response, is there like or maybe if you have a single favorite like support for Rhea that she has with other characters?
Man, no, yeah, nobody's ever brought me a specific line. Other than I had a couple come up to me and they said, we would like you to bless our marriage as Rhea. And so I said, may the goddess protect you, my children. So that was like, that's the one line that I will like sign, may the goddess protect you, my child, on an autograph poster. But that's the only, no one's ever like brought a line to me for any of the characters and been like, this is my favorite line. Can you say this line? Otherwise, I totally will. But no, nobody's ever done that.
Have you played very much of Heroes?
I do play a little bit of Heroes. It's nice when it's like in such a convenient place that you just like pick it up and play as you go. You don't have to like sit down and jump in, which after I'm recording for a long day, it's very hard to like be able to decompress with video games as you've been working in video games all day. Sometimes it's not the case, but usually I will tell people I'm so like emotionally spent that I just want to stare at a wall for a little bit. But that one is so convenient that I can literally just take it out and play a little bit. So I do play a little bit on and off, certainly not for extended periods of time, especially now as I have a 6 month old. So that definitely takes away any sort of free time that I used to play more frequently. But I'll find some time when I can.
I know one thing that we hadn't touched on yet were the certain fun skins that Sita and Rhea have, like the Halloween
Yeah,
one, all that.
yeah.
Is there
Oh,
any
they're so cool. Whenever they say we're coming in to do another pass for a different skin or a different holiday, I always get very, very excited. And I say, do you have any art? Even if it's preliminary art, can I please see? Because it informs so much. Yeah, I specifically remember the Halloween ones. They were very excited. There were so many details, even just in the preliminary art. So it was really fun to get to see it when it was finalized. It was incredible.
I'm not sure if you've gotten told this yet specifically, but when you had the Fallen Rhea, I think it was a couple of years ago in
Yes.
Heroes,
Yeah.
all the lines that you did in that were just so incredibly well done.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I love getting to do anything and everything, but man, uh Fallen Rhea, or they call her Dark Rhea when we're going in to record, or the director will call it Dark Rhea. She's like, oh man, Dark Rhea makes me so happy. And I'm like, yeah, me too. It's just nice to kind of get to like sink in there, go to that place, because oftentimes that is not the place that you want to be as a human being out with people in the wild and your loved ones. But it's so important to get to feel your feelings and go to that place so that you can take care of yourself. So I always really embrace any opportunity that somebody lets me like dig into my feelings and work through some of that stuff, which is lovely.
Was there because I mean I guess it is technically Rhea too, but when you played Saros, like
Oh yeah, yeah.
the separate version of her, that's like
Mhm.
any different of a direction.
Um, man, that one is very tricky. Usually they'll say we've got like Fallen Rhea and Dark Rhea, and then once we go to Saros, um, I want to say there's a little bit more of a regal quality, but also uh, the anger is bigger and bolder and less broken and more. I would say Fallen Rhea or Dark Rhea is still a little bit more introspective, working through the feelings, like really sad. So I guess there's a little bit more sadness and pain. And with Saros, it's far more anger and aggression. It's a little more outward rather than inward, would probably be the biggest difference between the two.
And this is unrelated, but vocally speaking, for anime or anything, what do you think the cases where you've had to alter your voice the most significantly for a role?
Uh, I mean, definitely for Coach Ro Lives Alone. I remember I've worked with Stephanie Shea and I've known Stephanie Shea for years. And she was like, I did not know that your voice could sound this way. So that was a huge compliment. So that one definitely shifted a lot. Um, I feel like I think the beginning, the first time I did like a lower register voice was A2 in Near. And then once I got to work on that, and then I was auditioning more with a lower register voice, I did a lot more of that, like with Cyberpunk and various other games, which was really fun to get to do. Um, I also worked on a game recently called Call of the Call of Dragons. And I play a character named Kella, and she has a Southern accent and a lisp. And that's been super fun to get to do because not often do you get to do accents, first of all. And then, second of all, getting to do accent with some sort of speech alteration. That's been really fun to get to do, especially since I'm from Texas. And I guess another character that really my husband was like, I don't think that sounds like you at all, is Manon in Street Fighter 6.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and speaking on boy voices too, I have found that certain people that I had asked have like different processes for doing boy voices. Is there anything specific that you do?
There's not really anything specific that I do for any of the characters, like that I have to do a warm up or placement in my voice. And so much of finding the character and finding the placement of the voice for me is very intuitive, just like looking at the character, listening to the reference line, if there is any reference line, like with Coach Rose, certainly there was because we have the Japanese voice actor. So just learning about the character and finding out who this person is, how old they are, things like that, and then kind of with all of that knowledge, what comes out, and then getting to adjust that if the client says, "Can we make it a little higher? Can we make it a little lower? Can we add some rasp? Can we add a little nasal quality?" All of those kinds of things. I will say it definitely did influence the character, at least for Coach Rowe. I was getting over a pretty bad cold or sinus infection when I was auditioning for the character. So in the audition, I was trying to remove this sort of nasal quality. And then as we were working on it, it was maintaining a little bit of that nasal quality that was still there for the audition. So that was an accidental thing that then I had to kind of channel and keep going throughout the rest of the series.
Most recently, is there anything else that's upcoming or already out that you can safely talk about that you're part of?
No, not that I
Okay.
could safely talk about. There's been a couple of things that I've been working on in the last couple of weeks that have been there's been a lot of recording and a lot of work on a lot of different projects, which has been very fun, but definitely not at a place where they would allow me to talk about anything yet, unfortunately.
Well, is there anything that you want to say to the Fire Emblem community?
Oh, I am so thrilled to get to be a part of this franchise, and I feel so lucky every time that I get to see Fire Emblem cosplayers or get to see you guys in lines. First of all, the Fire Emblem fan base is incredible at creating the most amazing plushies or the most amazing art or jackets or t-shirts to support their favorite characters and to support their favorite games. And it brings me so much joy to see your love and passion for this game and these characters. So thank you for your love and for your passion and for being so enthusiastic and wanting to talk to me and invite me into this amazing community with you guys. It has been such a joy and such a journey, and I feel so grateful to be a part of it.
Well, my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
What do I want my legacy to be? Oh my gosh. That's so hard. My gosh. Uh, it's like scary to think of when you are like, man, I hope I have so much more work to come. Obviously, I want to be known for doing good work, not just in my job, but also in my life. I want to be known for helping people and making a difference in people's lives. Because as much as I love getting to do this job, it's what I've wanted to do since I was a kid. It's a job, and so I want to be able to make a difference in the real world as well. So I want my work not just to be in the booth or on camera, but in the real world. And of course, I want my legacy to be that I did a good job taking care of my daughter and any future children that I have, and that I was there for them and present for them. This is such a demanding profession because it's so competitive. So it requires so much time and passion and love and drive. But my daughter is first and foremost, and my family is first and foremost my priority. So while I'm so lucky to get to do this, I want to know, and I want them to know that I was present and I was there for them, and that they really truly are my legacy. In addition to the work and the characters that I play, so I guess just knowing that I brought love, I brought light, and I left the world a little bit better than I found it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you making time to do this.
Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, have a good rest of your night then.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.